Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. I am so thrilled you're here today because we have a genuinely fascinating deep dive ahead of us. We are going to unpack the rhetorical strategies behind a really highly charged, fast-paced piece of political commentary. Now, whether you follow politics like it's a sport or you just kind of want to understand how media narratives get built, our goal today is to impartially break down the actual mechanics of this source material. We're going to look at exactly how it uses really stark cultural comparisons, rapid-fire timelines, and highly selective economic data to build a very specific and very compelling argument. Okay, let's dive right into this. We've got a lot of ground to cover, so here's our roadmap for today. 1. A tale of two visions. 2. The Geneva-Iran deal. 3. Markets and energy prices. 4. Strategy over morality. And finally, 5. Policy debates and partisanship. All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, A Tale of Two Visions, the Cultural Dichotomy. Notice the highly specific imagery selected here by the source to frame its argument. It instantly paints a picture of two entirely different Americas. On one side, it labels Team Conservative, and it highlights a White House UFC event featuring flags, troops, and very traditional displays of patriotism. But then, on the exact opposite side, it defines the left by pointing to White House pride events, topless activists, and protesters chanting the word fascist. So the framing here uses these very specific events to argue that one side embraces traditional, working-class American values, while the other side is purposefully alienating those exact same voters. And honestly, this perfectly distills their core rhetorical strategy. It explicitly calls the conservative event a backyard barbecue. It frames it as fun, normal, and inviting, because, who doesn't love a backyard barbecue? Meanwhile, it completely dismisses the liberal counterprogramming as a political sermon, framing it as preachy, lecturing, and just totally out of touch with everyday people. It's really a masterclass in using language to shape audience affiliation. Moving right along to Section 2, the Geneva-Iran deal, shifting to foreign policy. Just look at this timeline the commentary throws at its audience. 1 a.m., the UFC event wraps up. 3 a.m., Air Force One departs. 9 a.m., arrival at the Geneva G7 summit. There is a massive emphasis placed here on the president's relentless schedule. By highlighting his physical stamina and basically his total lack of sleep, this hustle acts as a framing device to implicitly argue for his undeniable competence and drive on the foreign policy stage. So the crucial point is how the mechanics of this Geneva-Iran deal are explained to us. It breaks down into a strict, super easily digestible framework. No compliance, no cash. The commentary insists that Iran's actions, things like eliminating enriched material and allowing inspections, well, those must happen first. Only then does the U.S. response of sanctions relief follow. And this is framed as a radical, common-sense departure from past diplomatic strategies. To really anchor this point, a direct quote from J.D. Vance is pulled in. He says, if we see the Iranians making action to eliminate their stockpile of enriched material, then yes, sanctions relief will follow. The argument uses this soundbite to demonstrate a very clear show us, don't trust us negotiation strategy. It ensures the audience sees the administration as demanding verified behavior before offering up any global rewards. Which brings us to Section 3, Markets and Energy Prices, the Economic Reaction. 52,000. The narrative punches in this massive number, celebrating the Dow nearing an incredible all-time intraday high following that geopolitical breakthrough. And the rhetorical strategy here is highly effective. It points to Wall Street roaring as undeniable numerical proof that the administration's aggressive foreign policy is an absolute win for the domestic economy. And this brilliantly illustrates the second half of that economic argument. Oil prices tumbling below $80 a barrel, which represents a 5% drop. By directly connecting easing geopolitical fears in the Strait of Hormuz to tangibly lower prices at the pump, the analysis argues that the average citizen is seeing immediate, practical, real-world benefits from this leadership. To further amplify these economic wins, the source includes a clip of House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries struggling during a live television interview. When he tries to deploy a talking point about high gas prices, he actually mistakenly cites the Obama and Biden administrations. So the narrative seizes on this, framing the live television gaffe as a political knockout punch that proves opposition talking points are completely unraveling in the face of all this positive economic data. All right, Section 4, Strategy over Morality, the Changing Democratic Playbook. This exact quote is pulled straight from a Democratic commentator to make the source's case. Republicans at this point can ask us to take the moral high ground. That is over. By highlighting this very specific footage, the argument isolates the exact rhetoric it's reacting to.
It uses this moment to suggest the opposing party is actively and publicly abandoning its previous foundational values.
Let's walk through how this shift in strategy is interpreted based on those comments. It outlines a really deliberate pivot, putting emotions aside, being purely strategic, and focusing relentlessly on gaining power to take over the Senate and the House. The conclusion drawn here is that the left is abandoning its long-held claims of decency and norms, opting instead for a raw, uncompromising pursuit of political dominance. Which leads us to our final part, Section 5, Policy Debates and Partisanship, the Reparations Argument. Let's move to this and see how it builds on that overall theme of deep political division. The argument explicitly contrasts two highly polarized viewpoints. On one side, it presents a congresswoman's perspective, which asserts that opposing reparations is actually a calculated plot to disenfranchise minority voters and take over local school boards. Conversely, the rebuttal is presented, arguing that opposing a multi-billion-dollar payout is simply basic common sense, resting on the premise that no one alive today experienced or perpetuated historical slavery. It's a really powerful illustration highlighting these vast ideological divides. Summarizing its entire thesis, the analysis builds up to this final set of contrasts. It aligns its preferred worldview with lower gas prices, patriotism, and common sense. Simultaneously, it frames the opposition as inventing conspiracies, abandoning the moral high ground, and relying on extreme rhetoric. The ultimate conclusion it wants you to walk away with is that by leaning into this extreme messaging, the left is actively punching holes in its own campaign strategy. So, what does this all mean for us? It leaves us with this pretty provocative thought to ponder. How do stark cultural contrasts and the use of highly selective economic data actually shape our ultimate perception of political leadership? By breaking down this commentary today, we can clearly see the mechanics of persuasion at work, how imagery, timelines, and carefully selected quotes are woven together to build a very specific version of reality. The next time you see a political headline, ask yourself, what story are they really trying to sell me? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I will see you next time as we decode another fascinating topic.